Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Just me today. Emily is not with us, but I do have a special guest. He's wonderful. He's handsome. I'm a little biased. His name is Dr. Joseph Smith. He's a finance professor from Washington and Lee, and he happens to be my husband. So welcome to the podcast, Joey.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So Joey is here to share a little bit of his expertise with us. And the theme of this episode and kind of a series that we're running a little bit is to dive deep into that concept of responsible parenthood. So as Catholics, we know that we are called to be good stewards in our family, not only of our talents, but also of our treasure. And I wanted to have Joey on to talk a little bit about ways that we can finance our kids' future and looking to the future, not only and the present, how we can teach our kids, just smart financial concepts, overall thought patterns, approaches to money. So we're not operating from a place of fear. Much is the same in the realm of our human relationships and in human sexuality. When Emily and I talk about not approaching family planning from a state of fear, but instead knowledgeable and confident and prayerfully discerning God's will. We want to do the same thing with finances. We don't want it to be a scary thing. We don't want our kids to have this idea that we can just have whatever we want, and we don't want them to also have a scarcity mindset either. So prudent, responsible, and I think Joey has a lot of really great insights and knowledge to offer us and to offer all of our listeners, all those who are parents who have been thinking or maybe have not been thinking about the future and their kids and how to set them up for financial success, because we're so in the weeds of the day. And I know how that is sometimes as a parent. You're just trying to get to dinner and get to bedtime that you might not be thinking, a couple years down the line. But we want to be trying to balance both, where we're in the present, but we're also thinking into the future. And especially as Catholic Christians, we have that eternal mindset. So we know that we're not only forming our kids for the present, but for the future and ultimately for eternity. So Joey, why don't we start with you sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do professionally. And then you can either kind of go straight into it or we'll kind of come back to the question, but how your home life was regarding your financial education. Because I know you and I have talked about this a lot and I've talked about it with other people. You had a little bit of a different home experience than I did when it came to money. We had some similarities, but also some differences. So first start with, who you are and what you do.
Right. So great to be on. My name is Joey Smith. I currently, as you mentioned, I'm a finance professor at Washington and Lee University, but I had a little bit of a windy path to get there. I was born and raised in Southern California. I went to college in Virginia and then law school. I was an Air Force JAG for a few years and then went back to business school, really focused a lot on finance. And my first job out of business school was as working in corporate finance for Walmart at their headquarters in Northwest Arkansas. Liked it a lot, but I started teaching on the side. I liked that even more. And so for the past 8 years, I've been teaching and researching in the area of finance, and I've really loved it. To go back to your original or your follow-on question was kind of how I grew up with money. Both of my parents grew up themselves really poor. None of my 4 grandparents even graduated from high school. So both of them you might say had a little bit of a scarcity mindset. And they did an amazing job. I mean, they especially from a savings standpoint, they were both FBI agents. So both parents were working. They spent a lot less than they made. So they had leftovers and they saved it, while at the same time raising my brother and I in a really comfortable lifestyle. And so, but growing up, it was very clear that saving was a priority. And even if now as a finance professor, I may take a little bit of issues with the way that they invested, I think, they got 95% of it right. And I'm really blessed.
So when you say that it was clear that savings was a priority, how was that clear? Was it like very explicitly spoken to you and your brother around the dinner table about, hey, dad and I are saving this much money in this way? Or was it just more, seeing mom with all the coupons every week and browsing the internet for the best flight deals and vacation packages and things, like trying to and doing yard sailing? Like, was it overt just from the way that they live, or was it direct and overt?
Probably more, I experienced it versus, lots and lots of conversations. I can remember some conversations, but more it was the mindset of, clearly we weren't poor, but yeah, we used coupons to, whenever we went out for dinner, my mom loved to go yard sailing to find really good deals. So I just recognized that, hey, while they were making reasonably good money, we weren't, they were government workers, as FBI agents, but I recognized that even though they had a level of comfortness, they also really prioritized, not being frivolous with their spending, and in fact being very conscious in many areas.
As you got older, did you become more aware of exactly how they saved money and, grew kind of built wealth, if you will, or put the money aside? Did you have any idea, like, did they just kind of put it under their bed or in their piggy bank, or was there something greater here? They were
Yeah.
in the stock market, they were working with someone.
Well, yeah, even from a young age, I knew that they were working with an advisor. And when I was young, I really thought that was neat that you could grow your money without even working, once you invested it. And so I actually did a job shadow day when I want to say in fifth or sixth grade with the advisor my parents used. So I was very aware that they were putting it to work, through investments, and that it was growing. I didn't know details on the numbers, but I just had an idea that, hey, it wasn't just set it aside for a rainy day, but it was, grow it in a responsible way.
So interesting. I want to highlight something for our listeners because Emily and I have read through a couple of encyclicals now. And one of them most recently we did over the summer was about talking to your kids about human sexuality and teaching them and being the primary teachers of them, and how, while it came up in that encyclical, the need to specifically and directly address certain topics, the overarching theme of it was just, they will know it by the way you love in your home, and the way the husband and wife treat each other, and the way you treat your kids, the parents' perspective on the relationships. So kind of like that idea that more is caught than taught. So it's just interesting to hear, even in this realm, of financial health, your relationship with money, that even that seems that it was more kind of caught than taught, or just, led by example and not necessarily a lot of direct instruction. So I guess now, being where you are as a financial professor, even maybe before you got to teaching, at what point along the way did you start to become even more aware of, oh, wow, here's what my parents, did, or maybe are you comfortable with what you were given as a child, or do you wish there was even more direct instruction when it came to money and investment? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, like, after you left the house, you went to college, and then you went into your first professional role as a JAG. You did end up buying a house shortly after that, and your parents did kind of help coach you through that process, teaching you what they had learned in their own real estate investment, right? So did you become more aware at that point of the skills of mom and dad were more transferable to you, and that was a little bit more direct instruction, or do you wish you had had that a little bit earlier?
I think that, yeah, having your first job, first paycheck, the first real chance to do serious savings, that was a big learning point. I think in large part, in buying a house, I would say that too was very helpful. But, looking back, I think they knew the basics, and but I also realized that the depth of their knowledge wasn't infinite. They didn't know a whole lot about it. They just knew that, hey, if you saved part of your nest egg or part of your paycheck, things are going to turn out better for you. So I think that was the lesson they taught. I don't know if they had the capacity to really go a lot beyond that about how to think about, investing in stocks versus bonds. That wasn't really their wheelhouse. I think they thought, hey, we're doing 90% of this game is spending less than you make and then putting the difference to work in a responsible way. They had an advisor who, looking back, I probably think was probably more expensive than they needed, but it at least did the primary job well of getting money saved for the future. So I think they did it in a really good way. I think that, at the margins, could I have taken issue with, oh, it would have been better to do this versus that? Probably now, in retrospect, as a finance professor, I would say, yeah, maybe it was suboptimal, but I think they did about as much as they could given their skill set and knowledge set.
So interesting. Again, I'm just going to make some parallels for our listeners because we've had couples on to share kind of their experience, especially couples who have married as virgins, and they share their story about how they grew up learning about human sexuality. And oftentimes they have shared that in each of their homes, it was clear that the message was that sex is for marriage, but there wasn't a lot more education. But even that, I would say, in the kind of parallel with what you're sharing, is like, that's 90% of the way there. Like, that, it's right. Like, that is true. There's a very specific context for this act. So even if mom and dad didn't have the knowledge and breadth of like theology of the body to get into the nitty gritty, like at least they're kind of practicing and preaching the most of the meat of the potatoes, if you will. So it sounds like in that same idea here, when it came to finances, you were pretty much what was communicated was really effective and was a substantial amount of what you needed to know. And then you went into your, go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with what you're saying. And I think it's transferable to a lot of areas of life. I think the same things with nutrition and fitness, where, if you really, really enjoy it and you like the science of it, you can go many, many layers deep. But I think at a base level, you can become knowledgeable enough to where, hey, you're doing the right things. Are you exactly optimizing in every? Maybe not, but you can get 90% of the way there with just some kind of basic due diligence. So yeah, I think what you're saying, whether it's human sexuality, whether it's finance, whether it's nutrition, fitness, I think everyone probably has a decent idea of some of the basics that you just need to get right. And then if you really love this stuff, you can study it more and really get very nuanced and optimized. But yeah, I think it's applicable in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, which is helpful to know that, okay, it's actually not rocket science, But that being said, if you don't know the basics, then you don't know the basics and you can't do the basics. So having that knowledge is also still important, even if it's not, extra level. So on that note, let's try to provide our listeners with a little bit of more of basics of finances, because I know I've talked to you about this a lot. It's one of the things I admire so much about you and you bring to our marriage is your kind of love and nerdiness for like researching different tax laws, different, caveats, different loopholes, not even loopholes, just different opportunities for you to invest in our kids in their future, whether that's through activities and growing in their, individual talents, but also tangibly with finances. So if you were talking to a couple, or say there's a couple that's listening right now, like, wow, I haven't really given a ton of thought to the future for our kids, maybe even they're recognizing, like, I haven't even given a ton of thought for like our own retirement. Like, we're kind of still just living in the moment. And so they're having that sense of restlessness, like, okay, maybe in the area of money, I haven't been as responsible as I need to be. They're feeling some type of stirring, I guess. How would you recommend, or what would you recommend as kind of like a first step?
Yeah, probably a first step is just getting kind of a budget in order. I'm not someone that's in favor of, budgeting for your whole life, or for the long term. But if you're having a hard time, saving, that's, the first ingredient is you need to save a little bit of today for tomorrow. And so I think really getting a handle on your finances, how much money is coming in, and then what are your monthly or weekly expenditures? I think that's kind of the first step, is to get a handle on your current situation. And then the goal is going to be, hey, how can you, spend a little bit less than you make? And then once you do that, well, then it gets interesting because there's a lot of different investment opportunities. I think the first steps as far as investing would be, taking advantage of an employer match on a 401k. A lot of employers nowadays, because most people don't have pensions, employers offer 401k programs as a way to help you save for your future. And oftentimes there is a dollar for dollar sometimes, or maybe 50 cents on the dollar match, to where your employer says, hey, if you're willing to put in $1 into your retirement, we will also put in $1 up to a certain percentage. Oftentimes that may be 4 or 5 or 6%, sometimes even higher. But let's say, your employer is willing to put up to 5% of your salary into your 401k. If you do it yourself, that is really low hanging fruit. I mean, you'll never find another investment opportunity that will literally double overnight. But in the case of investing in your employer's 401k, they're offering a 5% match. If you put in 5%, they put in 5%. Your 5% just grew to 10% without doing any work. So I think, as far as basics, I would say get a handle on your personal expenditures, your finances. Try to create that breathing room where you're spending less than you make, and then use that difference into something that's really a slam dunk kind of investment, like a 401k, to where you can get a match on that.
So I don't know everything about the finance world, right? Just like what you've kind of exposed me to and some things that I've like picked up along the way. My understanding in the world of finance that there's a little bit of a debate about whether you're in a season that maybe you are experiencing a little heaviness of debt and you're not sure, and then but you also recognize you're not really saving for retirement. Which camp do you belong in? You need to get rid of all debt and then you can start contributing to your retirement fund or your 401k, or could you just start investing in your retirement now and just, start also chipping away at debt. You can kind of do both at the same time, but you really want to be starting your retirement fund as soon as possible, as opposed to just wait until you get all the debt taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty nuanced discussion, but in talking about debt, I think you want to think about, what's the type of debt. Most financial folks will say, how debt on the home you live in, debt potentially on a car. Those are kind of reasonable expenses. Sometimes, especially like on a car, it may be necessary. Those are not seen as kind of egregious forms of debt typically. If it's credit card debt or other kinds of debt, that may be higher prioritized. But yeah, it's interesting when you talk about order of operations. Where do you put your next dollar? I think that it's really, really hard to say no to the employer match, just because that's 100% return overnight. Even sometimes with debt obligations, you may see, you may owe, 15%, which seems like a lot, but if your 401k offers 100% match, that would seem like really hard to pass on. But maybe to the extent that you fill up that employer match, you put in your 5%, they put in their 5%, then I think there's a really good argument for your next dollars going towards extinguishing what we might call bad debt, meaning debt that's outside of your home mortgage or a car loan.
Now, one of the things I, again, appreciate about you is, and I get to witness this firsthand. And so I'm just sharing this as a kind of a window into a practical way to do this with your kids, is that, our son has gotten money from, family members for a birthday or from doing some jobs. And you and I, but I would say really you, have taken upon yourself to go to the bank with him, right? Open up a savings account for him, have conversations, because he, of course he's 9, so he wants to spend his money on toys at Walmart. And so to use it as an opportunity to say, well, you could buy that, or, right? We could put some of it over here and, we'll grow. And obviously, our family's a little bit different because of your job, the fact that you teach finance, and the boys know that, and they want to understand what that means. And so to sit with them and to say, you look at like a stock market, or you talk about a company and how you can invest in a company, and then that money grows. And even Max, right, like has a couple stocks in different companies that he chose, and he put a little bit of his savings account into that. And so do you think those are things correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think your parents did that with you, but those are like little things that you could do even with your kids. And then you could kind of check on it and see, oh, look, it went up. So now your $10 you put in or whatever it is now $100. And you didn't even do anything. You didn't have to work. Like it just grew. Do you think that that's well, obviously we think it's a valuable lesson because we're doing it, but yeah, would that be something that you would kind of recommend as just a small teaching opportunity to show kids, hey, this is pretty, your money can be really powerful and it can double and triple and continue to grow and you don't really have to do anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, back to what we were saying before about it, more is caught than taught. I think it's, easy to have a conversation. Hey, it's important to save and your money will grow. But I don't think anything compares to them actually seeing that in action of like, wow, Max, because, probably in part because I worked for Walmart before, but he invested in Walmart and he actually, timed it pretty well, invested when they were kind of low and they went up pretty quickly. And so I think you just seeing that in his face as, wow, like I bought it when it was $80 and now it's worth $150. I think experiencing that was powerful, a lot more powerful than me just saying, hey, it's important to save because you do this and it'll grow over time. The seeing it play out, I think, and on the other side too, is also realizing that there's risk involved, right? It's not just, oh yeah, things always grow. You start to understand risk, reward, trade-offs. He's invested in a couple other stocks that haven't done as well. And so I think that's given him the lesson of risk. Whereas, with Walmart, it was a great lesson of, wow, this can really grow a lot. But that's probably achieving kind of the balance between understanding the rewards, but also the prudence side of it, where you need to be, smart with how you're investing.
Yeah. And I think the ultimate lesson of, well, you don't have to be knee-jerk reaction either. Like you've discerned this is the right path, right? And so we'll say, like, investing in a company over a long period of time will most likely lead into the positive. It will not be a negative thing. And so as you're experiencing it along the way, the bumps, maybe the troughs, the peaks and the valleys, to have the ability to persevere through that and to not look at the immediate moment and the feeling you might get from that immediate moment to dictate your next decision right away, not to respond knee-jerk in fear, but to be rational and to say, okay, this is normal, kind of the ebbs and flows, and we're just going to keep sticking it out. And there's always time to definitely like pull out of something, right? If you realize, okay, if I have invested, not only invested money-wise, but my time, my interest, like, okay, it's time to change course. But for most things, if I properly discerned and I'm on that path, well, then it's just the nature of riding out the kind of the highs and lows of life, like within marriage, right? Like, okay, no, I've discerned this is my vocation. We are a family. And it's not always rainbows and butterflies. And it's not always really hard things either. It just kind of goes up and down. And the importance of sticking to something, I think you can really transfer that lesson to finance when you do something like that with your kids.
Yeah, I think, especially, through those two lessons, right? You bought one stock, it went up, another stock went down. That probably leads to a natural learning that, maybe diversification is important, right? Like he thought both the investments were really good at that point in time. He made the investment. One turned out well, one didn't. So it probably teaches you a little bit of humility and that, hey, I just like we're all taught at a young age, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Maybe it's smart then to diversify and invest in different stocks so that just in case one or two don't do so well, the others can lift it up. So I think, but again, it goes back to that actually doing to the extent that you can, and allowing the kid to experience it, I think is worthwhile compared to just kind of pontificating as a parent.
Right. Something else that I know we do in our family and that we wish, I feel like, I know we talked about, we're both eager for our kids to reach a working age just so they can start to experience earning an income, going to work, working and getting paid for things. And also just, using their talents and growing in that way. But we have to wait for them to get a little older because they're not of age yet. However, we do try to find or we partake of opportunities when neighbors offer like, hey, I'd like to pay your son to walk the dog because we'll be out of town all day, or we're going away for the week to go to the beach. Can they take out the trash and check the mail? Like giving kids the opportunities to try out those little jobs, to be responsible, to do it when they don't want to necessarily do it, and then to receive some type of an income from it. And then from that income, save, spend, give, right? That idea of like, okay, we get to spend a little bit of it, we're going to save some of it, and then we're going to give some of it to those who are in need. So, along those lines of kind of what can we do, we can do that directly with our kid. However, they're kids, so they're not earning, $80,000 a year. Like, we're not at the stage where we're teaching them and setting them up for their own retirement. However, there are opportunities that I know you have found and things that you've researched and looked into, which is one of the reasons why I want to have you on the podcast to share with people. Ways that we as parents now can even be helping set our kids up for their future retirements or their future starting of work after, post-graduation from high school or from getting them ready for college that maybe people might not be aware of. So what are some of the things that are, I guess, getting you most excited financially as a parent right now that you're doing for the kids that you would want to have other parents be aware of and to kind of understand the benefits of those?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most powerful lessons that personal finance teaches you is the way that compounding works, which means that the earlier you start, the better. And depending on a parent's financial goals, there's a lot of different things that could make sense. For example, for college saving, if you envision your kids going to college, 529 plans are specific vehicles designed for that. You put in money, it grows tax-free so that when you pull it out to spend it on college, all that growth you're not taxed on. So that's a huge benefit. And in recent times, sometimes people worry that they could oversave in a 529 plan, but they've done things, it's always been the case that you could always change the beneficiary. So if you put money for one kid to go to college and you realize, they got a scholarship or their college was less expensive, so we didn't spend all of it, you can designate that to the kid behind them. So there's that kind of release valve, if you will. And there's also now the ability to put part of the money that was in their savings, in their college savings account, it can actually go into their retirement account later. So there's a lot of kind of release valves. You don't want to unnecessarily overfund it, but if you have that worry, there are ways to get that money out. So that's one opportunity. To the extent that your kid does.
Sorry, Joey, can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
So 529 plans. So is that something like, how does someone find out how to start that? Is that a federal program? Is that a state program? Do they go online? Do they have to see an accountant?
Yeah.
Like, how does someone access that?
Yeah, I mean, most of the major firms, like whether it's Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, they'll offer these 529 accounts. They are the plans are run by each of the states. Oftentimes, you may even have your state may give you a tax benefit in the current year to invest, which makes it, a double whammy. Not only do you get to save on taxes this year, but the growth of the money goes untaxed if it's spent on education. So really, if you just check with the major financial institutions that you might already be acquainted with, whether it's, again, Vanguard or Fidelity or Charles Schwab, they're going to have those available. And there'll be states offering specific plans, but you don't have to necessarily invest in your specific state's plan.
So if I'm looking, and then so if I invested in my state plan with Vanguard, let's say, but my kid went to school in a different state, do these 529 plans only work within the state that you are resident?
No, it can be used for any college in the state.
Okay, including like community college or vocational schools?
They have expanded the definition to where it can pay for all sorts of things like trade schools, community colleges, and things like that. It's really over the years become more expansive as opposed to less.
Okay, so maybe we can provide the listeners with just links maybe to these three main firms that you mentioned and like a 429 plan link. So that way, people, again, access wise, I think a lot of people just don't even know, like, where do I begin to go look for this thing? So, right. And sometimes a Google search can be overwhelming, which is why we like to have experts on to say, like, where exactly would you go for your kid? Like, what link would you click on? So right. That's great. Okay, I'll list those. Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off. What else were you going to say?
Yeah, so beyond 529 plans, they're specifically designed for college or trade schools. Other ways, to the extent that your kid works, a custodial Roth IRA would be an amazing vehicle, teaching them that, hey, maybe you made $4,000 or $5,000 this summer doing a job. Maybe you should put aside some portion of that. And if you as a parent want to incentivize it, we often hear it's a great idea to say, hey, if you put in $1,500 of your $5,000, I will match it into something like a custodial Roth IRA. The nice thing about these Roth IRAs is that the money you put in, it grows tax-free. And when you pull it out in retirement, you're not taxed on it again. So it just ends up being a really good growth vehicle. If you assume that, the stock market is on average going to return 8 to 10%, and you have a kid at, 12, 13, 14, 15 doing jobs, when you look at what that growth is expected to be, it's actually north of 100. So if a kid puts in, $1 at 15, that's expected to grow to over $100 by the time they retire. So it's just really powerful. Obviously, inflation will happen between when they're working in high school and retirement, but for it to go up 100-fold is just so much that you'd hate for someone to miss out on that kind of growth.
So does it cost? Oh, I'm sorry, Jay.
Yeah, you'd hate for someone to miss out on that kind of growth if just delaying a little bit of gratification today can lead to a big, beautiful tomorrow.
So custodial Roth IRA, how does someone open that? Does that cost money to open it? Again, where do they go to do that? Because everything you just said to me, this sounds like the biggest gift, even if a parent doesn't match anything. Just what an amazing gift to offer your child. And if it just takes clicking on a link and setting something up and then inserting some money, even to your point, even if just one summer of work, they just added in $1,000 and then they didn't touch it, until they were like 65 or 70, that would be a large sum of money just letting that sit there for that long. But hopefully, they're able to put more in. And then I have a follow-up question to that too. So after this initial money, as someone who's a youth, this money in this, I'm assuming that's why it's called custodial, right? Because the parent has custody over it. So when they turn 18, does it become fully in the hands of the child?
That's right. Right. So,
Okay.
As a custodial Roth, it would once the child becomes 18, it's theirs. You hope that, hey, they realize this money was for retirement, so they're not gonna, take it out and pay penalties before they are of retirement age, but technically they could. So that's why the teaching at home, the showing, leading by example at home is going to be really important as well. But to your question about cost, no, they're usually it doesn't cost anything usually to open up an account. Again, the major players like Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab all offer these kind of products. A lot of other firms too, but frankly, too many to mention. But
Okay.
yeah, it's a pretty common vehicle.
Okay, amazing. So I hope everyone heard that. There's no fee to open any of these things.
Well, I can't say for any institution there's no fee, but I know for the major ones that there's no fees. Yeah.
Okay, so those ones that, again, Joey mentioned, we'll link in the show notes, so you can go look on that. And this is, again, I'll have it under kind of the headline or the subtitle of Custodial Roth IRA. So if you have a child who is working, like Chick-fil-A, 15 years old, this would be a really great thing to start doing. And then just to open this, but then it would be even greater to kind of have that conversation of incentive of like, hey, Max, for every $100 you put in, we'll match you $100. Or if you put in up to this much, this summer, if you were able to save $3,000, we'll match you $3,000 after the end of the summer. And then following up with that, Joey, do you think too, like, again, because kids are we know the prefrontal cortex is not formed until they're 25. So would it be even more helpful, to have like that visual again, to say, hey, as I'm getting pushback from my kid who just wants to spend the money right now, right? Because we don't know if we're raising a spender or a saver. To have that visual to say like, look, remember, you put this money in now, even in like 40, even in 20 years, like this is how much it's going to go. If you don't do anything, you don't even have to work anymore. This money is just doing that. Do you think kind of having that visual is helpful for our kids to kind of know like, okay, there is that goal. I'm working towards something, because there's such far off goals. And maybe, sorry, I'll let you talk too. Maybe it's like, we also have to just say, like, sometimes you just have to do things for our kids because we know it's good for them, and even if they're not like totally on board, but it might be like a helpful, nice thing to say, like, hey, remember what we're working towards, even if they're not like super excited about it.
Yeah. And I do think it's tougher for most people at a young age to really, think about their 60-year-old self. Right. And so it can be tough, but yeah, I think it's, oftentimes still the right thing to do. Also, I just want to tell listeners that, the parental match, I know everyone's in different place. And sometimes that may be hard to do if you're, if you're not even, investing for yourself as much. But I think it's more the, teaching the kid, hey, you made $5,000. Can you put 1,000 of it away? And if you can't match it, that $1,000 they put in, like we said, has the potential to grow to a very, very big number by the time they retire. And it's just really powerful.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, really. I mean, any amount, right? Like any amount is going to grow if you just put it in there to do it. So I guess on that note, maybe I'm saying any amount. Is that not right? Is there a minimum you have to put in order to open these accounts?
I'm not familiar with all the different ones. I mean, typically what I've seen is they're usually pretty small. It may be something like $200 or $300, or potentially even less. It's definitely not a crazy threshold.
Okay. Probably even likely under 1,000. Okay. Okay, great. So we've got 529 plans thinking about education, and then this custodial Roth for our kids who are starting to work. And then what else?
Well, the recently passed legislation with these things that are called Trump accounts are also really powerful, and they're very similar in some ways to that custodial Roth IRA, except your kid doesn't have to be working. So
Nice.
for kids, I think, be born between 2025 and 2028, the government actually on their own is putting $1,000 into the account if you open it up for them. So that's just free money. You don't have to do anything. The government will put $1,000 for any kid born between 2025 and 2028. So that's amazing. But if
you have to open it. Sorry. Just
right. Yeah. I mean, you do have to open the account.
So the parent still has to do something.
Right.
Okay.
So the parent opens the account, the government will automatically put in $1,000. And then for any kids 18 and younger, you as the parent can contribute up to $5,000 per kid into these Trump accounts. And it's automatically invested in something that looks like the S&P 500, basically the 500 biggest stocks. You don't have any choice on what it's invested in, but it's just invested in basically the 500 largest companies in the US. And when they're 18, that money would kind of become an IRA, not a Roth IRA, but a regular IRA. And that could just be a powerful amount of money, which at some point after they turn 18, you could convert it to a Roth IRA, pay the taxes that are owed, and then you have something that never would be subject to taxes again. So that's another powerful, the reason why it's kind of a nice add-on to just having the custodial Roth, again, is because your kids don't have to be working. So you can just do that for your kids. Again, I think the same advice that we hear on an airplane, where you want to put on your mask before helping others, is important, right? You got to make sure that you're saving for yourself and thinking about your own financial future. But to the extent you have that extra capacity, I think these Trump accounts are going to be a nice tool for people to give to their kids and set themselves up in the right direction.
Well, especially if you're born between 2025 and 2028, because the government adds $1,000. So even if all you do is open it for your kid, the government will put $1,000 in there. And then even if you can't financially afford to add very much at all for whatever period of time, right, until you get your finances a little bit more in order and you feel more confident that, okay, now you can start putting some in. Do you think that it would be necessary to have kind of these parallels? Like, should you also then open up the custodial Roth when your kid starts working? Or if they've had this Trump account going, because it is a Roth IRA versus an IRA, would it be better to just, to stop giving to the Trump account then and just give the custodial Roth once the child's working, or just to keep putting money into the Trump account?
Well, you're going to be capped when a child's working. They are capped to investing in that custodial Roth up to the amount that they make. So if they make, $3,000, even though you could put up to, I think this year it's $7,500. If the child only makes $3,000, and the most they're going to be able to put into a custodial Roth is going to be the $3,000. So I think, as far as priority, I would say yes, filling up that Roth bucket is the most valuable, but the both and would, to the extent that you're able, it just adds more capacity, right? So if your kid made $10,000 and they were able to put $7,500 of it into a Roth IRA, and you could still put $5,000 on top of that into a Trump account to really kind of hypercharge their future retirement goals. I mean, that's like the pinnacle or the best. But obviously anything that you can give to either of those accounts is powerful.
We should have probably started with this since we started using the lingo for people who don't know what these terms mean. What is an IRA versus a Roth IRA?
Yeah, so IRA just stands for individual retirement account. The traditional IRA is where you put money in. Sometimes you get a tax break on that money. It grows until you're of retirement age. When you are of retirement age, when you pull it out, then the government says, okay, now you owe us. We gave you that tax break on the front end potentially. Now at the end, you owe us money when you take it out. A Roth IRA is almost the opposite, where you don't typically get a tax break on the front end when you put the money in. But when you pull the money out at retirement age, you don't have to pay taxes on it. So there's, beyond the scope of this podcast, but there's, debates on, to the extent you can, should you invest in traditional versus Roth? But at its core, the Roth kind of avoid taxes at the end. The traditional, you can have tax savings at the time you make the investment. Both have some tax advantage to them, but whether one's better than the other is kind of a ripe debate that happens a lot.
And basically, either is better than neither.
Of course, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
Either way, you're saving for the future. If you put it into a mutual fund or a solid investment, it should grow over time and put you in a better position by the time you retire.
And so the Trump accounts, this could also just kind of become like your kid's savings account. So as they are, 9, 10, 11 years old, and they're doing little neighborhood jobs for people, and they're mowing, their grandfather's lawn, and they get like 20, or their birthday, they get like some money in an envelope. You can even just, again, further this idea of like, we're going to save a little, spend a little, give a little. Okay, well, let's put some, this Trump account, this account becomes like your savings account. So why not just put it there?
I'd caveat that with, you have to recognize, unlike most savings account that you can dip into when the time is right, if you're going to put it into a traditional IRA or Roth IRA, you have to recognize that it may be painful to access it in terms of owing a penalty if you access it before 59 and a half. So you have to make sure that the goals then are, hey, for the long-term retirement, versus you don't want to think of it as a savings account so that I can buy a car or I can have a down payment on a house. For those kind of things, we haven't talked about it yet, but if you're trying to give to your kids, there are what are called UTMA and UGMA accounts. The Uniform Gift to Minors Act and the Uniform Trust to Minors Act, I believe. But those are great ways if you're kind of designating money for the middle term, like, hey, you want to help your kid, put a down payment on their first house, or have some, money after they graduate college to go on a trip or to buy their first car. Those kind of things you wouldn't want to put in a Roth account, because those are designed for retirement and often have penalties associated with pulling that money out before retirement. So for more intermediate or shorter term saving, the IRA vehicles wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay, so we'll link in the show notes for people, again, kind of access, like how do I open a Trump account? Because I think the way that you described it to me when you said you opened it for the boys, I mean, it was so easy. Like you just...
It really was. Yeah, I would say it was not a complicated process, pretty seamless. So I recommend looking into it if you think it could be right.
Okay, so I'll link that in the show notes too for people who are curious and want to open up one of those for their kids. Again, that can be for any kid, 18 and younger. It's not for education. You don't have to be working, just any kid. And then again, if you're born between 2025 and 2028, $1,000 just goes right into that account. So even if you have no intention of putting any money into it, if your kids are born through that year, all you do is open it up and the government automatically puts $1,000 in there, which again, that idea of compounding interest is just going to keep growing for them.
Right.
Okay. And then I haven't heard you talk much about this other one. So what is the middle, these last two you just mentioned? So kind of more of like...
They're not really, the UGMA and UTMAs they're not tax advantage, but it's just a way to kind of set up something so that your kids, they won't be able to access it till 18 or 21, but it's a way for them to invest and for you to invest for them in things like, stocks and bonds and mutual funds that can grow over time, but there's no penalty to accessing it before a certain age, like there is the IRA accounts.
Okay, gotcha. So, but with these, you have to pay taxes on the money before it goes into the account, and then you get you get taxed on the money when you take it out too.
Yeah, you would get taxed on the growth. I'm not an expert in tax, but the UGMA and UTMAs don't offer the same kind of tax advantages that the traditional IRA or Roth IRA would offer.
So, what would be the benefit of doing that versus just having a regular savings account at the bank?
Well, typically the growth on a traditional savings account is not going to be all that much. You might be getting, 1% or 2%, whereas if you look at the stock market, typically the stock market has gone up by more than that each year. So you're just getting kind of some more growth for, like I said, maybe intermediate goals you have for your kids. If you think, hey, I want to, some people might be really big onto education. So the 529 plan. What about, after they're in college, if you want them to be able to have some money to spend, that's where an UGMA or UTMA account for your minor child could make sense. And then the long term, right, for retirement, you can look at a custodial Roth IRA, or you could look at these Trump accounts that are designed more for that long term.
These middle term ones that you're talking about now, though, how does one start those? Is it the same type of thing? They go to like a Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, they go to their bank down the street?
Yeah, I mean, most are going to offer that, but if you're thinking, hey, we want this money to grow for 15 to 20 years or longer, then typically a savings account is not going to be as growth oriented. It's going to design just a classic savings account at a bank is great for, hey, I want to put in money that maybe the kid's going to want to spend next year or in 2 years. But if you've got a little bit longer time horizon, then I think most advisors would say you should probably be a little bit more growth oriented, investing in stocks or mutual funds, things like that that typically go up by more than what a savings account would go up by.
And that's did you say UTMA? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, UTMA.
Okay.
I think it's the Uniform Trust to Minors Act, and UGMA, the Uniform, I think, Gift to Minors Act. But they're just designed to kind of provide money kind of earmarked for your kids, but once they turn a certain age, but to be invested in things like the stock market.
Okay. So kind of a little bit a hyped up savings account, if you will, like more growth will come from those.
More growth, obviously more risk too, and especially in the short term where the stock market could go down. But yeah, typically geared toward more growth oriented mindset.
Okay. Awesome. Is there anything else you think to share?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot of the basics for things that are advantaged depending on, at what stage you're trying to invest in your kids for, right? If it's for college, that's 529s are great. If it's for their retirement, right, then you've got custodial Roth IRA is great, or Trump accounts. If it's for some kind of intermediate goal between then maybe an UGMA or UTMA, which gives them a lot more flexibility. It doesn't have to be spent on college. You don't have to wait till retirement, but for some spending that you want them to be able to do in between then, they're more flexible.
And are you knowledgeable at all with the Trump accounts? I know it's kind of like one of a more hot topic in finance right now. I think we were just talking about this the other morning, but isn't it true that there are some people who are also they're trying to make this a philanthropic and like an incentive for people who want to do philanthropic work? So maybe they look at a state and they say, okay, these number of Trump accounts belong to children who come from single parent homes. We're going to just put in $2,000 into all our Trump accounts. Me, wealthy businessman in the state of, I don't know, Illinois. I just want to do this for the bottom 1% of kids who have their Trump account open. I'm going to give them this much money. And then I think that I've heard that is something that's...
Yeah, I do know that that's happening. I couldn't tell you the specifics of where that's happening, but I do know these Trump accounts, it doesn't have to be the parent that's putting it in the child's account. In fact, they're even allowing employers as a benefit of employment, where the employer could put up, I think it's $2,500 into your kid's account. If you're a grandparent, you could do this. If you're an uncle, you could do this. So it's not limited to parents. Typically, we think of parents who would be wanting to do this, but I should mention that it doesn't have to be the parent.
anyone can put the money, not anybody can take the money out, but anybody can put the money in.
Right. It's going to become the child's once the child turns 18, and they're the only ones that would be able to take it out. But yes, as far as putting it in, it could be the parent, could be a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or even the parent's employer as part of the benefits package may offer to put money into this Trump account. Or like you mentioned, it could be philanthropic. It could be, I want to say, and I could be wrong, but Michael Dell from the Dell Computer Company, I wanted to say that he was putting money into a lot of people's kids that he was not relatives of, but just wanted to do that as, setting less fortunate kids up for success in the future. They were doing that. So yeah, a lot of different people could be the ones that are putting the money in.
So almost like the government could incentivize charitable giving by like giving you a tax break if you give this much money to people's Trump accounts.
Yeah, I don't know how if there's a tax break associated with it, but but it's just when people recognize the power of compounding, then it's natural for people to say, well, geez, I want to set these kids up, or so by putting the money in at a young age, they let it grow, right? Even kids that don't grow up wealthy maybe could have a really healthy retirement just by us doing this for them at a young age, or at least starting the train of getting them to think about investing. They realize, wow, this was done for me when I was, an infant. And now all of a sudden I'm 18, I got my first job. I want to continue this. Maybe it can be inspirational as well.
Right. Gosh, we're going to have so many people retiring so young because they've been investing since birth, hypothetically anyway. Okay. So what would be are there negatives to any of these things?
Well, obviously that's what we talked about before a little bit with, you have to assess what your capacity is. Every dollar that goes one place is a dollar that can't go somewhere else. So if you're having a hard time, with the basics, or you've got a lot of debt, I'm not sure if I would recommend, investing in a Trump account when you yourself are in a lot of debt that you can't pay. Right. So it's an order of operations thing. But beyond that, no, I don't see any detriments to them.
Do the Trump account, is there a minimum you have to put in order to open it?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
If there is, I don't think it's a super high bar.
Okay.
But I don't know the specifics on that.
Okay. So something, again, to just look into, because if it's just a matter of you get to open it and then you never know, maybe you live in a state where some very wealthy people want to be very generous and they'll just start putting money into people's random Trump accounts. So just having it open for your kid is not going to do any damage. Again, we can't give you the number that you have, if there is a number that you have to open one. But
I can say that you can open it, but you can open the account before having to put anything in. So if you're not sure, you can open the account, well, especially if they're born between 2025 and 2028, you'll get that free money. But you can open an account without funding it at all.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay, great.
Yeah, you can open the account without funding it, and then it's a separate decision how much you want to fund it. So I imagine the funding is going to be very low. What it may be $1. I don't know.
Okay, but just to get it open, but that has to be something the parents have to do.
Right. Yep.
Right.
The parents have to open up their kids.
Okay. They're not just opening automatically. If you're born between 2025 and 2028, you still have to go in and open it for their kid.
Yes.
You just get the money. And it's not automatically opening for anybody else either. So you can open it for all of your kids, but you just have to be the one to go do it. And again, we'll link in the show where you can go, show notes where you can go to do that.
You just have to put in some basic information, like their social security number, their gender. I think that's about it.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. Okay. Anything else, Tony, you can think of?
No, I think we covered, we covered the basics.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to ask some more questions, maybe some people are curious to learn a little bit more about even, their own personal retirement, not necessarily for their kids, would you feel comfortable with them reaching out to you? And if so, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy the topic of personal finance. It's kind of near and dear to my heart. And I think maybe LinkedIn would be a great way. So maybe if you could put my LinkedIn profile in the notes, more than happy to have people reach out.
Okay, great. I will do that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Check the show notes for all of these links to all these different firms if you're interested in any of those investment options. And then also look for Joey's LinkedIn page down there as well. All right. We will talk to you next episode. Thanks again, sweetie. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.